This is the worst show I've ever seen.
There's Hero Generation.
Yeah, I don't really care.
It's a sequel to the original show, but they kind of messed it up. It's like 5 years later, and the bad guy, Kenko, has teamed up with the hero, Ishiyama.
Hey everyone, Rascal here.
And Mama, welcome to our podcast.
Today we're covering the next series in the Ben 10 saga, Ben 10 Alien Force.
Yes, and taking place 5 years later, Ben is retired as a hero, but we have joining us today, Rascal family's own Ben 10,000, Ben and Dudley. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here.
So, as we mentioned, this series takes place 5 years later, and Ben has retired as a hero and leads a normal life. But when Grandpa has gone missing, he reunites with Gwen and the Omnitrix itself to find him.
Yes, and before we start, be sure to like, subscribe, include notifications about these on future podcasts and we'll pause videos.
Absolutely. So, this is my favorite version in the franchise, Ben 10 Alien Force.
Yes.
And I'm really excited that we're doing this finally after 100 years.
Yes.
And there's no way we could do this entire franchise without having Bennett here on one or more of the podcast.
Right.
Yes. Yes. And we have actually been binge watching and rewatching the entire franchise from the original Ben 10 all the way up to the unfortunate reboot that came later.
And the movies.
Right. And I feel like it's time we gave a really big tribute to this franchise because we have discussed this once or twice before, but it was back when we tried to cover everything in 1 hour, and that was way too much at once for everybody, so we decided to just break each show movie down one by one, so each one gets its own spotlight.
Yes. So this is actually a feature franchise of Superhero Month.
Yes.
So, inquiring minds want to know, Bennett, where does this stand in your favorites for the franchise?
To me, the Ben 10 Alien Force series is definitely one of my top favorite animated shows for sure. Mainly because it's a continuation from the original series and showing a much more older and experienced Ben. That'll certainly can make the younger audience maybe even relate more in a way.
Yeah, makes sense.
Now, for me, this was actually my first exposure to the Ben 10 franchise.
Yes,
You guys watched the original
Really?
Ben 10 classic.
Yes.
Yes, this is the first one I saw.
Yes.
I was aware that Rascal was watching it.
Yes.
But I didn't know what it was, and I remember at the time I was working at home, and I came out, and I was like, "What is that you're watching on TV?" She's like, "Wait, let me tell you what it is, Mom. Wait, what is that on his arm? Wait, let me tell you." And she said, "Just sit and watch," and I did, and I was like, "Oh, okay, you can watch it," and went back to work. So this was my first exposure.
Right. So yeah, I mostly watched the original by myself the whole way through. And then Alien Force, I started by myself and then you ended up watching it with me. So kind of like with Avatar, we ended up watching the whole thing together eventually.
And when there was this store that still existed called Blockbuster, we began renting the disc.
Blockbuster.
Yes.
We began renting the disc until they ran out and
Right.
they didn't have any more available.
Right. And then we tried to catch them on TV, like at the time when it was really airing multiple times a day. We would try to watch episodes that they would rerun and be in the order of the show so we could finish it, because at that time it was about to end and we had to finish catching up before it hit.
Now,
Absolutely.
as Bennett says, fun fact, this series as well as the other two actually were on Netflix for a short time.
Yeah.
Then they got snatched off.
That's true.
Yeah, and that was actually a much easier way for the whole family, actually, for us to watch it. We ended up watching it together years later. We watched
with Nana.
Yes, Alien Force and Ultimate Alien later on. And that's how we ended up watching all 3. And then there was a long time before we decided to watch Omniverse. So for us, it was like a Ben 10 trilogy for us, basically.
Yeah.
So it starts off with us seeing Ben and Gwen after so long, and not knowing what they're gonna look like or how they're gonna act.
Right.
And for me, after having seen the classic series and seeing this again, it was like, oh, it's so nice. They're more like brother and sister now after what happened in both of the movies prior to this series.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you have Kevin joining in the mix, and you saw how pretty bad he was in the classic, and realizing now he came back quite a lot of times. It's like, okay, can he stop coming back every season? Because it's getting ridiculous. And you see how at first you think, okay, he really hasn't changed. He's still trying to do cons and rip people off and selling alien tech. And then you see as the show go on, he has changed, and Ben and Gwen are big influence on him for him to go on the right path and stay on that path. So this was a huge thing for him to reform as it went on.
In a way, he was kind of like Eddie Brock, aka Venom from the Spider-Man franchise. He started off as this iconic villain of the main hero, and later on they decided to make him more like an anti-hero.
Yeah.
And nowadays he's just, well, a hero, kind of like Ben and Gwen.
Yeah.
And see, that was strange for me because, again, I hadn't seen the classic. And in my mind, he was always this nice guy, hero. He couldn't have been that bad. And then we watched the classic, and I was like, oh my gosh. I like the other Kevin better.
It was really bad.
Yeah, he was kind of relentless.
Yeah.
The best thing about him here is that he's got sass, and he says different quips and things to Ben, and a lot of them we just end up cracking up at because it's just like, where is he getting this from? You can't believe someone actually thought this out and wrote it. It was on the level of when Ben would say things about Gwen and insult her.
And maybe this is why he got chosen to be Beast Boy later, because it's the same type of personality.
Exactly, yeah.
Yes.
And then there's definitely something we gotta bring up is that there was a time when people were actually rewatching Ben 10 2 before us on Twitter and YouTube, and we kept seeing this common trend, and we didn't understand why people were saying this. There were ones that were watching the classic and Alien Force, but the weird thing is that they said they loved watching the classic again, but they started not to like Alien Force anymore because it was too dark, too grim, too serious, and the original was so lighthearted. Right, right. It's like they were saying all this time this was one of the best sequels, and now all of a sudden it's like, well, it's too serious for me. They like how light and fun it was, but then we watched.
Nostalgia's just clouding our minds.
Right, and then we watched classic, and they had some pretty heavy episodes, like was on Bozo and Ghost Freak and the movie, and it's like, what were you talking about? This wasn't like you're watching Tom and Jerry or something.
Right.
This show was heavy too.
Yeah.
It's just, and so we wanted to really show that, you know, we see some changes in seasons 3 and 4 because we learned different writers, but we don't hate Alien Force or say, oh, it's not as good anymore. It's still great.
Yeah,
we just see the change in it.
And I have actually appreciated even more than before. I love it more now that I've seen the classic. Definitely, absolutely. It's still my favorite.
Right.
Probably because it's the first one I've seen.
Right.
But I definitely understand why so many loved the classic and then went ahead and tuned in for this one because you knew, okay, this one was great. This has got to be good too.
Yes.
And Man of Action and Dwayne McDuffie didn't let you guys down.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, when we learned that they had changed writers for season 3, you could tell there was a tone shift. They tried to make it a little more lighthearted. Ben acted more cocky sometimes. There was some quick outfit changes. You could see the difference, but it wasn't so much of a change where you didn't like the show anymore. It just, you could tell when Dwayne McDuffie was writing and it was serious, or when it was someone else that Cartoon Network put in charge and they were trying to do something kind of goofy. So it kind of was like some hit or miss, but it still was good.
Yeah. It's still good, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And in the credits, we saw that, as you said, during the second and last season, he edited the scripts more.
Right.
And then the last 2 episodes, he wrote them. And it was obvious, those last 2 episodes, that Dwayne McDuffie wrote these episodes.
Yeah.
It was obvious.
Yeah.
And then we were also mentioning how you were saying so many people were saying it didn't feel like an ending.
Yeah.
And then not knowing that they were bringing out another version.
Right, and then immediately, oh, Ben Tennyson Ultimate Alien, like, we just finished this, so like, can you give me 5 minutes? he just had an advertisement immediately. Oh, Ultimate Alien coming soon, like, we just finished this, you're telling me this now? It's not even time to breathe.
Now, one of the characters in here that, you know, I love to hate, who wasn't in the classic, and I was so disappointed he wasn't in it, is Michael Morningstar.
Right.
I mean, you can't help but love to hate this guy.
With lovely Gwen, and oh, good grief.
Lovely Gwen.
And every time he came back, he's the villain, and we're like, it's Michael Morningstar.
Right.
You're not supposed to be happy to see this guy.
Right, and he just kept getting worse and worse every time he came back. And when you saw the first episode, you were thinking at first, like, oh, is this going to be a new character added like they tried to do with Alan? And as it goes on, you see,
Cooper.
right, you see, like, okay, yeah, something is off with him. Kevin, of course, is jealous, but he actually has a reason this time. And everything that he says to Morningstar is just like things you don't want to hear him say because you know he'll probably get kicked off TV. He said, you think what I'm thinking? Yeah, I know what I'm thinking. It's like, what are you thinking? You're just jealous. Yeah, that's part of it, but still.
And those are actually some of the best episodes with the entire cast. And Will Wheaton was perfect. And I was so disappointed when we decided to go ahead and watch Omniverse that he wasn't Michael Morningstar in that one.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, I was like, who are you?
Why did you bring him back? He could have raised his voice higher and pretended to be a kid.
Oh. Yeah, when they put him in Omniverse in that Scooby-Doo episode that I had no idea why they even did that, he looked like Fred, like, why?
Yes.
And then he was immediately back to being a joke. It's like, well, why did you bring him back if you were just going to make him the goofball? What was the point? That kind of ruined all the love to hate things. Kind of like, can he just leave now? And when they brought him back in the reboot, like you said, they aged him down, but they did not bring back Will Wheaton, which didn't make sense. And then they also changed his backstory where he was a movie star and they were parodying Twilight that nobody does anymore. And it was like, oh, he's a heartthrob. Gwen was in love with him immediately, and he was
a genius and figures out everything.
Right. Even he was pointing out, like, you figured that out already. And he was an energy vampire still, but they made sure he was not love to hate or attractive or anything. And they kind of leave it as the fangirls that love him in the movies, like some of them know about the powers, and they don't care, and they let him feed off of them. And it's like, well, this is really bad considering what's going on now. This is a really bad image. And then they had him acting like he was like a bad boyfriend, a charm caster, and he was like he's 12. Why is he acting like he's an 18-year-old and he hurts her? This was like sending way bad signals.
Yeah. Totally. It was like it was a whole different character.
Yeah.
So it should have just been called a whole different character.
Exactly, yeah.
Now, also, I remember I thought that this version was the one in which Cooper first appeared.
Yeah.
And again, I was surprised to see that he was in the classic.
Yeah.
But Cooper in here was a good character.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was good.
Yeah, and when you saw
Crushing
him,
on Gwen.
right, and he was still acting like that with her, and then when you saw him in Ultimate Alien, he was a whole different. He was like a whole different character.
It was basically Kevin with blonde hair.
Yes, that's what she said today. She said that today.
Yes, that was it.
Yes.
And it was like, you still don't have a chance. She still doesn't want you because you're not a bad boy. So.
Oh, man.
He was too nice.
Right.
Oh. But this is definitely one of the examples of why this franchise was so great.
Right.
I mean, sometimes you have the sequel and it's like, you should have just left it at the first one, but you couldn't say that with this one.
Right.
And you couldn't say it with the next one either.
Right.
It was different, but it was still good.
Right.
And this one excelled at having everyone grow older, still be teens, which they were, Grandpa Max was still around, thank God.
Yeah.
I was like, if they had taken him out, it would have been horrible.
Yeah.
But he was still there, and the mom and dad, and
met the
got
grandmother.
Yes, I was going to say, introduced to some new characters like Verdona.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
One of the best episodes.
Yes.
That was definitely unexpected to see her.
Yeah, we were like, what?
And she was loony. I mean, she fit right in with the rest of the family.
Yeah.
Just
They acted
loony.
like she stuck out. Like, nah, she fits.
Yep. She fit, and she loved Max.
Yes.
She really did love him so.
Yeah.
And I love when she said, oh, and he said, hi, Grandma. Oh, do you have powers too?
No. Shame. And then she was done. Like, wow, that was short.
It was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant way to introduce a new character. And again, even though she wasn't evil, but she was crazy.
Yeah.
You still, in the end, ended up liking her.
Right.
You hoped that she would return,
Right.
which
And
she never did.
and she understood that, okay, this is what she wants to do, and she let it go, which is a surprise, because, yeah, you did expect her to be an antagonist.
And she never returned, unfortunately.
Right. I was kind of hoping she did. Because the parents said, oh, I'll be checking on you every now and then. And Gwen's mom said, oh, joy. I was waiting, like, when's she coming back?
So it was pretty. And then here's another fun fact.
Okay.
And I told you that the mom was voiced by Juliet Landau.
Yeah.
And the grandma Verdona was voiced by her real life mom, Barbara Bain.
No wonder, you know what? No wonder it felt so real when she would say things about her. So that was just perfect.
I remember when I first saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, that's a real life mom. You're like, what, that's a real life mom. And only thing, if the dad could have been on there, that would have been perfect.
Right.
But it didn't happen.
Yeah.
But they had little fun nuggets in there like that when you would see the voice cast and you would be surprised at who was voicing whom returned. D. Bradley Baker was everyone. It was wonderful.
Right. And the
Every alien.
Yeah.
right. It's like he's a one-man army for the aliens. And the only thing we wish they had in here that we didn't realize until later was Ultimate Alien. We kind of wish Ben 10,000 had appeared in Alien Force.
Definitely.
Like appear in every series.
You were robbed.
Yes, that was wrong.
Yeah. We were like, oh, he appears. Like, no, he goes to Ultimate Alien. I'm like, he should appear once a series. That would have been perfect.
Definitely.
To see how much different he changed each time when different events happened. Because every time they went to the future, he looked different. There were different surroundings, different aliens, different friends. By the time of Omniverse, it was like
and they could have left him out of that.
Right.
Because they destroyed him in that. It would have been better to have him in here.
like by the end, it became Modern Family in space. So it's
Yeah.
So, what are some of you guys' favorite moments in this? Besides the one we've mentioned, what are some of your favorite moments?
I think some of my favorite moments would definitely be like with, like how in that one episode when they were trying to bring that, like that baby.
Yes,
alien
that's it.
to
That's my
another
favorite
planet.
too. That's my
And they
favorite too.
introduced that Rap, who was like one of John DiMaggio's best characters.
Yes. Did you just eat the baby?
Very nice.
Yes, that was hilarious.
Yes. And I love when he said, don't talk to me. And I love when he said at the end, don't talk to me ever again.
Okay. Like, yeah, you're gonna screw him off with that.
Yeah, that was a great episode. And it was unexpected.
Right.
And it was like nothing you've seen before.
Right.
And you really didn't expect that to happen.
Right.
It was like a whoa moment. You wanted to pass out like Kevin.
Right. Okay. What about you, Mom? I know your favorite episode.
What is my favorite episode?
The one with Big Chill becoming a...
Your mommy. A dad.
A papa.
Yes. Big Chill is my favorite. I love Big Chill.
Oh, it is.
Yes, that is. You're right. My favorite episode. And that was the one time Julie was okay with me. She was trying to help him figure out what was wrong. And he was eating all the metal everywhere.
Right. And when he was human, he was eating pickles like he was pregnant.
Yeah. And Ken was like, you sure like pickles a lot.
Yeah, we got any more?
And like, don't you find it strange? But yes, that is one of the best comedic ones with an actual plot and storyline.
Yes.
It was done perfectly.
Yes.
And then right after they were born, the babies left. I was like, what are they doing?
Said, oh, that's normal. Like, why? I wanted to see them come back and say, Papa.
Yes. And we never saw them again. So yes, that is one of my top. That is my top one. That's correct.
Yes. Okay, so for me, I think...
Besides the one that Bennett loves.
Right. Okay, it's actually 2 episodes. One would be when they had another baby alien and they didn't know it was a baby because it was gigantic and it was going around taking things and they started beating it up. Yes. And they started beating it up thinking it was some mindless monster, and then Gwen figured out it was a baby alien.
And she started crying like Gwen says, and Ben said, oh, come on, I didn't hit you that hard. And it was crying.
And all the reactions to it were hilarious. And it's like, are you going to help me? Are you going to stand around all day and argue about it? Or are you going to help me rescue it? And then Ben said, I like to stand around here all day. And then Kevin said, I like to continue arguing about it. And she looked at him like she wanted to hurt them. You shouldn't have asked. And my other episode, which was ended up being a really well-made one, would be when there was a guy who didn't know he was a DNA alien and he had amnesia. I thought that was a pretty good episode because you found out the DNA aliens were just humans with aliens on them, which is why they kept saying they were lower than them. And when he found what they were doing, unlike most shows, he didn't go back to being evil and kept going. He saw this was wrong and he thought he couldn't help, and Ben convinced him to do it, even in his DNA alien form. So I thought that was actually a really great episode, and it showed how much Ben wanted to cure them and save them. He didn't want to just beat them up anymore, knowing they were all people.
Right. Unlike Attack on Titan.
Right. Okay. Oh, no, you didn't.
So I'm glad you brought the DNA aliens up because that was one of the best parts of the series.
Yeah.
They had some really good villains.
Yes.
Very good villains.
Yeah. A lot of them memorable. I mean, of course, Vilgax came back later, but as far as having ones before him...
The main one was the DNA.
Yeah, for the first 2 seasons, it ended up being how do they stop them from taking over the Earth. And it wasn't just a one-and-done thing in one season. They actually planned this out for 2 seasons. You had to see how it worked, and you had to find out what was their plan the whole time. It wasn't just simply a takeover or enslavement. They just wanted to wipe out the whole planet. That wasn't even their plan to begin with.
And you had the...
kind of like Independence Day.
Yeah.
Right!
And you had the requisite hunter villain.
Yeah.
And you had Simeon, who you didn't know really was going to be a villain.
Right.
And then you find out, okay, this is a bad guy.
Yeah.
It's like one of Ben's aliens, but he's a bad guy.
Right. And you end up seeing that with some of the other plumbers that were half alien. Like you saw Alan and Manny and Pierce and others that came in. It was actually pretty interesting to see his alien species just actually exist, and it's not just him as the alien, so you actually seeing other people with his aliens.
But Michael Morningstar was a villain.
Yes. Well, yes.
And he was another major.
Right.
But they were so good. I mean, they were written so well. And as you said, they had best lines and great plots and stories, and they really were excellent.
Yes.
For an animated, a Western animated series that supposedly was for children, but really isn't.
Right.
It's for everyone.
Right.
They had some excellent villains.
Yeah.
It kind of reminded you of what they took from here and applied to Generator X in terms of villains.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one more thing I got to bring up is what should have been something that was so cliche and generic turned out to be really good was the albedo plot line.
Yes, yes. Chili fries. A delicacy. I'm like, they're not a delicacy.
Yeah, that should have, when people usually do the evil twin trope thing, usually it's kind of like, okay, they're the opposite, they're the bad guy. You kind of know it goes through the motions, but here it wasn't just he was an evil twin brother or just happened to be a lookalike.
Or an alternate version.
Right.
Negative verse.
Right, it wasn't alien. This was someone else, another alien that ended up getting his form and despised it, and then ended up being the evil twin. And it was like they were saying this is what Ben could have ended up with if he had, I guess, more Galvin intelligence. You want to say he's an idiot because he's not too much of an idiot now, but if he had like more intelligence, and he took more advantage of the watch, this is probably what he could end up being if he wasn't careful and actually being a threat, because Albedo wasn't a joke except for the chili fries.
What Albedo was an arrogant, ignorant jerk who was a tech wizard. That's what he was.
Yeah.
He was like, what I tell you, he was like Mandar.
Yes.
Yes, he was, if I remember correctly, the assistant to Asmus when he was building the Omnitrix.
Yes. Yeah, you're right. And it's like, see where you didn't want him back.
So, let's each of us tell listeners or viewers or both what you want them to take away from your love of this series, and why, if they haven't watched it, they should watch it. Bennett?
Well, it's definitely a fun adventure series, especially for those who love superheroes, kind of like guys like me, or even people who like watching Marvel or even the DC franchise. I'd say it's right up their alley.
Yeah,
people
that's
who
true.
like superheroes, who like animation, who like superheroes.
Right.
Animation.
Aliens.
Right. Yeah, true. And you're right, because in a way, I ended up feeling all of those things watching and didn't know all those things I ended up loving years later.
Okay, so what would you say you want to have them take away?
That if you really want to see something of high quality action, storytelling, writing, character growth, creativity, and the genres you have to like with sci-fi and superheroes within it, you could get so much out of Ben 10, because we can see so many people being inspired by not only just Alien Force, but the classic and just the franchise as a whole. It had changed the game for Cartoon Network and for animation and how people viewed aliens. You didn't just have Star Trek and other classic shows anymore. Ben 10 changed the game, and now everyone wants to have their own alien species and their world building and their own universe of aliens and different things based off things they love or they will want to see. And that really is a big thing for me too, because I ended up loving sci-fi years later after watching Men in Black the first time. So this just went up right at the alley, and I think people who love that movie and sci-fi would absolutely love it and would get so much depth and what it meant to be a hero out of Ben 10.
Absolutely. Me? Okay, excuse me.
Well, yes,
what I
you
would
said
say,
all three.
if like me, you've never seen the classic, and this is your first one to start, this is an excellent way to start watching the franchise and go backwards. I would also like to add, regardless of how old you are listening, it doesn't matter. And again, if you haven't seen the classic and you just start with this, you get a little backstory in the first few episodes. And then it doesn't matter if you haven't seen the classic. This is so good that you don't know that you're missing anything, because it seems complete in the way that it was produced and directed and written. It seems like its own series. And it's absolutely wonderful. And if you haven't seen it, you gotta watch it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I think it's probably one of the best shows you'll ever see, not just as a show itself, but as a franchise.
Absolutely. Anytime that I'm asked on Twitter or anywhere, what's one of my favorite top 10 Western animated series, Ben 10 Alien Force is always on the list.
Yeah. And I think for Ben 10 as a whole, classic, Alien Force Ultimate Alien, I think it's probably up there, like top 5, up there with Voltron Legendary Defender.
Oh, absolutely. And we have to say that we'll always support Man of Action. They follow us on Twitter. And we'll always support them because they've got these brilliant creative ideas. And what makes this special is just the right formula of everyone who was a part of this. Everything coming together, right place, right time. and it's iconoclast. You're definitely not going to see anything else like this. They've made other shows. Generator Rex was great. They've done movies like Big Hero 6. They've done other things, and those things are fine and great, but there will never be anything, as you did say earlier, like Ben 10. This franchise is one of a kind.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
So, for all of you out there, don't forget, if you haven't already, subscribe for updates and weekly videos on your favorite anime series, anime shows, and all things animation.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you. If we are not already following you, you want us to check out your channel, tell us the name below. Better yet, leave a link. We'll click on it, check you out, and support you as well.
Yes.
And thank you so much, Bennett, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I had a blast.
And we hope to see you again, hint, hint,
yes.
for Generator Rex.
Yes. Oh, and possibly.
Hey, I'm up for it.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, and maybe Heroes United.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is the first purchase I ever made on iTunes. That was Heroes United.
Yes. So, thank you all so much for watching. I'm Rascal Entertainment.
And I'm Mom Entertainment.
Have a toontastic day.
Peace.
It's hero time.
It's not very realistic, is all I'm saying. Anyway, there's only 5 more of these before they cycle back to the original show. You'll see, it's way better.
And reporters sitting, flashing lights, trying to walk around, man, who the hell are you? What you wanna do? Well, man, it's on you. Man, it's on you. Hit her in my dreams, she was my queen. A castle in the mountaintops, rivers and streams. Plucking sunlight from the sky in my pocket, give it to you later on.